I want you just to focus with me on verse 36 because I love what Jesus gives us as a solution. I mean, don't you like the solution? I love to hear people, go on and on about all the problems. Got to have this problem. And I always go, If you aren't going to tell me the solution, I don't need to hear about all the problems. What's the solution? We're supposed to have the solution. And Jesus says, here's the solution, verse 36. Watch therefore and pray always. Now, let me give you a little secret to studying the Bible. One of the greatest things you can do in Bible study is before you attack the books, and I love books and have thousands of them, and I add constantly to my books. But the first course, the first thing I do, my hand just twitches whenever there's a verse I'm wondering about. I can't wait to start looking up the words. Because the best commentator on the Bible is the Bible. God comments on what he means within this book, because this is a supernaturally engineered book, and every part of it is there by divine design. Okay, so if you're looking at verse 36, and you say, watch therefore and pray always. That's a pretty heavy thing. Jesus is concluding this huge sermon with this simple application. Watch. I already told you about watch. Watch is an admonition from two words, the Greek form, an alpha privative, which means not. The second word is the word we get hypnotized from in English. In Greek, it's hupneo. When you put them together, hupneo means to avoid allowing the world around you to lull you to sleep. And by the way, it's a present active imperative, which means constantly, I command you, don't get put to sleep. So, okay, you got our attention, Lord. How do we not get put to sleep? Well, that's the pray part. He says, pray. Watch and pray. And he doesn't just say pray, he says pray always. Well, if you're a comfortable, well-adjusted American reader, you say, pray, I know what that is. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to sleep or keep and whatever, because I was never good at praying that when I was little. I forget the words to it. But we know about pray. No, it's not that easy. If you stop and think about it, pray is used a lot in the Bible, but there are 7 different original words that the Holy Spirit inspired that have been rendered in English, pray. But there are 7 different words. Isn't that fascinating? But comfortable, well-adjusted readers, we just think we know all about prayer. It's just, bow your head and say something. Well, that's not what this word is. It's not that. In fact, pray is one of 7 words used for prayer. It means to earnestly seek the hand of the Lord in a time of need. Luke uses this word in his 2 books. Remember, Luke wrote 2 books. This is the prequel, and then the sequel is Acts. So Luke and Acts are a pair. And in those 2 books, 15 times of the 22 times this word for prayer is used, Luke uses them. He liked this word. He captures it against the backdrop of Christ's ministry. The dictionary defines this word, which, by the way, is the word deomai actually is how you'd say it, deomai, as to want, desire, long for, ask, beg, I like that one, beg, pray, and make supplications. Now, you say, well, how do you get that out of it? Well, turn back. This is what I meant. Look at Luke chapter 5. I'm going to give you what is one of the most thrilling parts of Bible study for me, tracking down what God means by what he says, okay? Instead of me saying, I think, or to me it means this, what you do is your first course is to look back and see if God has ever spoken about this before and what he said when he spoke about it. And let me show you what I mean. In Luke chapter 5, we're looking at when Jesus concludes this huge, monumental, longest sermon he ever made on the end times and on the end of the world, he concludes it by saying, don't get hypnotized and do this all the time. And we're looking at the do this all the time part because that's what we should want to do. And he's saying, do this all the time. And we think we know what pray means, but we're not sure. So when else does Luke use it? Well, Luke 5:12. And it happened when he was in a certain city that, behold, a man who was full of leprosy saw Jesus, and he fell on his face and deomai'd him. There's that word, deomai. Now, in the New King James it says, and implored him. You ever had leprosy? Probably not. It was the most dreaded, feared disease of the ancient world. Because they didn't know where it came from. All they knew is what it did. They didn't really know what it did. Actually, we know now it's Hansen's disease, and it kills nerves. That's all it does. It doesn't eat stuff away. We do that. What happens is the leper slowly loses feeling in their extremities. Usually starts in the extremities. Ears, nose, fingers, toes. And what happens is they lose all feelings, and formerly when you would grab the handle of your cooking instrument, you go, ah! And you'd go get a rag and wrap it around. But the leper grabs the handle, just burning their hand away. They don't feel a thing. They've lost feeling. And they pull away and they go, oh, yeah, my skin's loose. I wonder why that is. They didn't feel anything. And their toes, they stub them and break them, and finally they end up walking on top of their toes. And they actually wear their toes off because they've lost feeling. And their ears, they get cold, they get bit, they scrape them with their hands or brush, or their nose gets hurt, and they don't feel it. And they gradually, it gets cut and infected, and they don't feel that's why lepers would lose their faces, because infection was in their ears and their fingers. They would actually wear them off, and lots of other things would happen, especially in a climate where you don't have, pest control and vermin control. If you can imagine, if something bit you in the night, you go, and you scurry it away. But if you're without feeling and something bit you in the night, it could just bite you as much as it wanted. And actually, in leper colonies, their biggest problem is that the rats eat the extremities of the people in the leper colony. It's just horrible. That's why the Bible says leprosy is a picture of sin. Sin deadens us. We should go like that when we're on something evil, but sin has deadened us, that we can't feel the damage it's doing to our soul. That's why leprosy is a picture of sin. Well, if you had leprosy and thought someone could heal you, you'd lost your fingers and toes and ears and nose and face, and you thought the only person with a cure was in front of you, and you got to fall on your face, how would you talk to him? That's what this word means. It's not a ho-hum, hold your cup of coffee and say, hey, got any time? I got a little problem here. This guy implored him, saying, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Now think about imploring, okay? Keep going to chapter 8. Turn over a couple pages, because Luke loves this word. I told you it's 15 of the times he uses, and every one of them is as colorful as this one. Luke 8:28. Another incredible account. This time it's the demon-possessed man. And Luke 8:28 says, when he, the demon-possessed man, saw Jesus, he cried out, he fell down before him, and with a loud voice said, what have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of Most High God? Deomai. I beg you, do not torment me. Now here's this demonized fella, this demon inside of a human, driving this human body all over the place and making it do all kinds of awful things. And since demons are not omnipresent or omniscient, nor can they sense everything that's going on, they're very localized. They just are a part of whatever Satan's got them doing right then. This demonized man, driven by the demon, is just flopping all over the place. And one day, it flops itself in front of someone, and as the demon looks out through that man's eyes, he goes, it's him. God, you are the judge. You're the one that cast Satan out, and you're the one that's going to put us into the lake of fire. Do you see the level of intensity? This demon uses the word that Jesus tells us to have in our talking to him. That Luke records through inspiration of God's Spirit that the amount of intensity of a demon not wanting to be thrown in the pit is the level of intensity we should be asking God to make us live our lives to count for him. He says, I beg you, deomai, I plead with you, I earnestly, fervently, please, don't do it now. Keep going to verse 38. Now the guy is free from the demon. It was the demon begging. Let's see how the guy does. Luke 8:38. Now the man from whom the demons, they were many, had departed, begged him. There's the same word. The word pray in chapter 21, verse 36 is right here. It's begged Jesus, that's the him, begged him that he might be with him. But Jesus sent him away and said, hey, you have something else you can do for me. And he did a great job. That's a great story I won't get into. Do you see the intensity? This man, delivered from the force of these demons that had driven him around, now sees the deliverer, and he begged him. He says, I want to stay with you. I long with all that I am. Not like, well, if I get around to it, I'll find a little time for you, God. This man begged Jesus. That's a real picture. Look at 9:38, chapter 9, verse 38. Luke uses the word again. And again, I want you to see whether it's a leper falling on his face, or a demon hating the pit, or a demon-delivered man wanting to stay with Jesus because of the safety and power and protection. Or look at 9:38. This is a parent. And look what it says in 38. Suddenly a man from the multitude cried out and said, Teacher, and here's the word from Luke 21:36, I implore you, Deomai, look on my son. He is my only child. Now, do you have children? Can you imagine what if you only had one child, and that was all your hope in this world? Back then, they just lived for their children because they were going to get old, and there was no social net, and there was no government, and there was no nothing, and they had to live with their children. Their children would help feed them. Their children would be there to close their eyes and bury them in the family. I mean, everything was, you had to have a child, and you hoped that they would survive. But this one isn't. And behold, verse 39, he's not surviving. A spirit seizes him. And he suddenly cries out. It convulses him, so he foams at the mouth, and it departs from him with great difficulty, bruising him. And so I implored your disciples to cast it out, but they could not. Back to verse 38. I implore you. Can you imagine the intensity of a father with his only child who's being terrorized by those demons, how he would look up at Jesus? And can you imagine the intensity of the way he would ask for something from the Lord? That's Luke 21:36. That's the level that we are to get at, realizing how fast time is going by, how climactic and catastrophically it shall end, how irretrievably and irrevocably it is gone, and we cannot alter it, and we beg the Lord that we not get hypnotized, thinking we've got endless sweeps around the face of the clock, and we'll get it done someday. And we start begging God, how can I be counted worthy to stand before you? We've already looked at what that big scene's going to be like, what it's going to be like with the redeemed of all the ages and all the angelic hosts and all those creatures and the lightnings and everything else. And we're begging him that we be worthy to stand before him and to give him something. It's the same intensity this dad has for his only son. Look at chapter 10. I mean, I could do this all day. It's so much fun. See how much fun Bible study is? Look at 10:2 of Luke, okay? Next chapter. Then he said to them, the harvest is truly great, but the laborers are few. Therefore, and he uses the same word, what we're supposed to pray for the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest is not supposed to be oh, Lord, if you want to, you can. But it's begging God to send laborers into the harvest field. You know, when you think about everything your children could do, you know, you could send them to Stanford or Oxford or Yale, and they could become a Rhodes Scholar. Have you factored in how useful they're going to be to God? You know, sometimes we steer our children incorrectly. We prepare them socially and academically and athletically and in the arts, and we don't prepare them to be useful for God. And you know, we should be begging God, do you want my children to go forth to be laborers in the harvest? Do you want my children to go and live in Mexico City in a tin top hovel and learn Spanish and minister to those who've never heard the gospel? Do you want my children to become a tent-making English teacher in China somewhere and live way out where they still fertilize with human excrement and it's horrible place to live, which is what China is like. If you've ever been there, you can smell their fields a mile away. But do you want my child to do that? See, this is a pretty intense thing. Beg the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers. If you're really doing that, you usually begin with those closest. Do you want them to go? Do you want me to go? Most of us could live the rest of our lives in a third world country quite ably. If you're not deeply in debt and you liquidated, most of us have more than 90% of the population of the world will ever have. It's an amazing thought. Here's the last one. Look at Luke 22:32, and then we'll back up to 21. Here's the last time it occurs in this book, and it's actually Jesus. And you can see his intensity. Luke 22:32, Jesus is talking about Peter, and this shows you how Jesus ever lives to make intercession for us. And how does he do that? Luke 22:32, but I have deomai, I have interceded, I have supplicated, I have begged, I have sought God for you, Peter, that your faith should not fail. And it's not going to. Because he says, and when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren.